Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Extraordinary Advisor Show on Horse's Mouth Live. My name is Ellen Rogin, and as always, I have great guests to help you in every area of your life, especially your business. And I'm thrilled to have a three-peat return guest.
Three-peat,
which we love to say from Chicago, though we haven't had any three-peats in a long time.
No.
David Fisher. And David, I'll give you his formal background in a minute, but David and I met many years ago. I saw him speaking on LinkedIn. He is a LinkedIn expert and a sales expert. And this is when no one knew how to use LinkedIn, was the first time I met him. And we
Right.
reconnected several years back because I'm on his mailing list. And he came out with this book. Let me see if I can get it in front of the camera there. The 575. I'm not doing a good job on that, but okay, 575, A Glimpse in Chicago. It's Chicago in haiku. And I'm like, who writes a book of haiku? But David did. So I got his book and we reconnected. And this has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today, but because St. Patrick's Day is a big Chicago holiday, I'm going to read the entry for March 17th, which says, "Cheers to those who came and come to melt in the pot. They get the job done." Haiku. David Fisher. Okay, so let's get down to
That's a good
business.
one. I like that one.
Dave and I were talking a few weeks ago, and he was telling me how he's really done such a great job adjusting his business and market based on how the whole world has changed. He is a LinkedIn influencer and expert, and I wanted him to come on and share some of this expertise with you all. So let me give you a bit about his formal background so you know how impressive it truly is. David J.P. Fisher, also known as D. Fish, is a speaker, coach, author of, get this, 9 books, including the best-selling Hyper-Connected Selling and Networking in the 21st Century, both awesome books that I have and have read. The subtitle to Selling Networking in the 21st Century is Why Your Network Sucks and What to Do About It. Great subtitle. He's in the he's a Sales Hall of Fame inductee, a LinkedIn influencer and collaborator, so knows what he's talking about. His 20 years experience as an entrepreneur, sales professional, an awesome guy. His goal is to help people understand the new sales Sherpa path, where social media, networking, and old school sales and communication are the key to providing value and staying relevant, which is so important to financial advisors. Dave does a lot of work in our industry, knows about how advisors work, understands there's compliance issues. So I figured he'd be the perfect guest for us to have today. So welcome, David. Thrilled to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I just come on your show to hear you say nice things about me. I love it. I see much more impressive on paper.
No. It's all true. Great. So we're in this era now that things have changed and they're not going to go back exactly like they were, and they probably shouldn't, right? Yeah, it's changed just a little bit. So in this post-pandemic world, what are you seeing about how advisors can do business development and how digital tools fit in with all of this?
Right. How many hours do we have to unpack that question? What was really interesting, and I think you can tie this back to even our relationship. I think it was over 10 years ago that we first met. And at that point, I was talking with financial service audiences, talking to them about networking and sales and LinkedIn. And at that point, it was just like a neat little fad, or, oh, hey, this LinkedIn thing could be cool. And what we saw over the intervening years is that our digital presence kept becoming more and more important. It kept becoming more essential to how we do business. But there was no real reason to really adopt it, right? To really kind of dive in to using these digital tools. And really what I think we've seen because of the pandemic and social distancing, we've seen about 10 years of digital transformation happen in 10 months, right? 2020 really was very revolutionary in that regard. And so something like LinkedIn profile, digital, moved from the periphery to something we had to do, right? We lived in 2020 in a digital first world. And I think we are going to find a new kind of resting point between the digital and the offline. I don't think we know exactly where that's going to be, but that is going to be an important part of the process, finding out where that new normal is. And for especially us as advisors, we can't just go back to putting LinkedIn and our digital presence aside again. And even if, I've talked to a lot of veteran advisors, for example, who are like, well, I've always been in person, face-to-face, relationship driven. That's great. Don't lose the relationship part, but you're going to have to be able to adopt more channels and digital channels to help move that relationship forward. So that's I think the overarching story of what we're going to see in the next 2 to 3 years.
So why is it important for advisors to build their brand or their digital brand on LinkedIn?
Because you are what your LinkedIn profile says you are, right? What's happened is, and again, we've seen this in the extreme because of social distancing, where we couldn't meet somebody in person. So that first impression, the first time that we engage with somebody, was more than likely going to be online and probably on LinkedIn. One of the reasons why I've always looked at LinkedIn as kind of the tent pole for an advisor's online presence is it is the preeminent social networking site. It does have 700 million members plus. If I look up your name and maybe your city or your company name on LinkedIn, on Google, your LinkedIn profile is probably going to be one of the top hits. And when somebody comes to that profile, if they don't know you, what they see is what they have to make their judgments on, right? And so that's why I think it's so important that, all professionals, but definitely financial advisors, realize that, they might have a wealth of experience and knowledge and a passion for helping their clients, but none of that comes through unless it's on the page, so to speak, or on the screen.
What mistakes have you seen advisors do in terms of their profile? Like when you see it, you're like, I really wish they wouldn't do that. Like the biggest, ways that they kind of blow that first impression.
Well, I think this ties into something you mentioned earlier, which was compliance. And what I mean by that is the industry in general moves slowly, right? Because they want to do things the right way and they want to make sure they're transparent and open and honest. So early on in the social media trajectory, a lot of larger financial service firms were very reticent to let people use these tools. Now that has changed dramatically. In fact, if you're watching or listening to this right now, you might want to even go and check with your own organization's compliance rules, because they might have changed in the last 3 to 6 months even. But the reason I bring that up is when advisors then look at their profile, they come to it with from a place of fear, like, oh, I can't say anything. I don't want to make a mistake, and so they don't do anything at all. And so the biggest mistake I see is advisors' incomplete profiles. Just all it is a disclaimer statement, and that's it. And so I, as a reader, maybe a potential client, a potential referral partner, I go to that profile and I'm like, I don't know anything about you. And so I have to start making up the story in my head. So that's probably the most egregious mistake. The next big mistake I see then is when advisors go, okay, well, I'm going to do a little something, but all they do is put in this very dry, cut and paste from the company website. That text is all they have on their profile, and it doesn't allow me to connect with a person. When somebody's at your LinkedIn profile, they're not at your company page, they're not your firm page, they're at your page. They want to find about you as a person. So if you don't let any of that person come out, it's just a huge opportunity that's lost. So I think that's probably Yeah, those are the biggest mistakes that I see.
And from even a compliance standpoint, if you're telling your story or who you are, I can't imagine a compliance department's going to have an issue with that. You're not making promissory statements. You're saying, ones I've liked, and you can tell me if this is kind of best practices, is where someone tells a bit of a story. Like, I got in this business because blah, 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 and they tell a story. And it makes me engaged. It's not like, we're your trusted advisor. We have integrity. Good.
Well, you're kind of getting to the other big mistake that I see people make. And by the way, you're absolutely right. Tell your story. Tell me about you. Yes, you have to follow the rules as far as making promises and all that kind of stuff. By the way, the FINRA SEC guidelines for a LinkedIn profile are the same for any other static content, meaning, you can't make promises. You can't talk about specific investments. Anything that you wouldn't put on your web page, you're not going to put on your profile. But everything else is fair game. And so, what I see advisors where they really miss the boat is they don't say, "Here's what makes me different." Maybe not unique. It's hard to be completely unique, but I mean, let's just pull the curtains aside. For many advisors, the products and services that they work with, while maybe not straight commodities, are very similar to other things that can be found in the industry. What makes somebody choose to work with you is more often than not you. So you have to be able to share, hey, this is what you're going to get when you work with me. Here's why I'm the perfect candidate to work with people who are working on, X, Y, or Z opportunities. Maybe you were an entrepreneur for years. You come from that entrepreneurial world. You work great with entrepreneurs. Or I remember working with a woman who came into financial advising as a second career. She'd been a teacher for 20 years, a grade school teacher. So if you think about her focus on educating her clients, like that was, something that she firmly believed was important. Let people know that. This isn't an online dating profile. You don't have to say, I like long walks on the beach. I'm a Virgo. I enjoy fine dining. But be a human being, right?
Yeah, I love that. So when we think about engagement, what do you think are some good practices or good ways for people to have more engagement, to really be there and not just have their profile and never get on LinkedIn at all?
That's a question I hear so often. People just say, well, what do I do with LinkedIn, right? Because we think, I'm going to go fill out my profile and that should be it. I think one of the easiest places for people to start is with this idea of listening. It's actually something I talk a lot about in my books, the idea of paying attention to what your network is talking about. So often we think about whether it's networking or LinkedIn or sales, I'm going to talk. Instead, think about, how can I listen? How can I pay attention? And especially on LinkedIn right now, one of the things I love to do myself, and I advise people to do, is go to LinkedIn regularly, if you can, every day for a few minutes. And instead of worrying about posting something, go through your news feed and find posts from your network that are interesting, engaging, relevant to you, and comment on it or like it. Ideally, you're going to comment, because likes, a thumbs up is always good, but it doesn't really start a conversation. But, think about ways where you could add a question or an observation or something to the post of somebody in your network because they thought it was important enough to share. When you start engaging with their content, it's great because it builds some social capital. It validates them. They feel a little more positive towards you. There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes with the LinkedIn algorithm where they're more likely to see your content in the future and you're more likely to see theirs. So that's such an easy thing to do. And even if you're a little nervous about going online and curating content or creating content yourself, all of us can go and respond to others. And it's a really powerful way to keep that conversation going, stay in front of people, stay on people's minds, so that when you are in a position to reach out and say, hey, I might be able to help you with that problem, or conversely, hey, could you help me with something? You're not starting from scratch. I think that's the easiest place for people to start. And then you can build on sharing content or, pulling material from your organization to put out there. But for most people, just start engaging first. Start talking, or listening instead of talking.
Such a great first step. And I have so many questions in my mind right now, but one of the things that I've seen happen that have helped people build a relationship with me is not like they're stalking me, but they're commenting. And I have someone who's continually shares my content. So she's a writer, and I reached out to her after 6 months of doing that, saying, one of the advisors I mentor came to me and was looking for a writer. Is this something you do? So she actually built a relationship with me, and I had a really nice experience. I was sharing content that was good. It wasn't disingenuous, but from a CNBC reporter. Right. She does a lot of personal finance things. And shortly after I did that, I got a call from NBC News, national news, and she had given them my name. So it was I was like, oh, like this really worked. That was part of what a hope is that it would develop a relationship with her. One of the questions I have for you, because I think you do this really well, and I've had people not do this well, where they'll tag me in their post for kind of no good reason, and it just annoys me because then I get all this feedback from that. You've tagged me in your post in a way that either compliments me or wants me to be engaged. So can you give us a little bit about that in terms of what's good etiquette for when you tag other people in your posts?
Yeah, so I think it's important to look at this tactically. So on a strategy level, this is really going into something akin to what you just talked about, this idea of building a relationship over time. Especially as you get a larger network, it's harder to see everybody's posts. It's harder for everybody to see your posts. But there are people that you want to build that relationship with. I think one of the biggest mistakes I've seen in the last year is that everybody jumped on LinkedIn because they had to, because they couldn't do anything else. And they looked at it as a sales tool. And in fact, there's a lot of bad actors in the financial advisor and the financial services space that have done this because they were sold this idea that they would just basically automate everything and they would reach out and blast people with messages and trying to prospect them. I have somebody who in the financial space today sent me the 6th automated message. I've already disconnected. I'm like, dude, like this, you're not going to get what you think you're going to get. But so there's a lot of that out there. A lot of people are frustrated with it. The better way of doing it, as I said, is to be more relationship driven. And so one of the things I do that you just mentioned is this idea of tagging people. So if you're not familiar with this on a very practical level, when you tag somebody in a post, if you're on your browser, you're on your mobile phone, you just put the @ symbol and start typing their name. You get a drop down menu, and their name pops up, and you tag them. What happens is when that post goes live, they get a notification that you tagged them, and so they can see right away that they can see this content that you've posted, and they can hopefully engage with it. And thank you for saying that I do it well, but what you just mentioned is exactly what I'm doing it. I only do it if it's going to compliment somebody or if they are relevant to what I just posted. So one of the things, and you don't do it just because you want to kind of get their attention. It's got to be relevant. So like when I talk about financial services topics, or you and I do a lot of work in the mindfulness space, especially mindfulness in our professional world. So when I post stuff on that, I'll tag you. Or if there are clients I've worked with, even clients I'd like to work with, as long as I know it's relevant to them, I do tag them. And for me, it's usually about 5 to 7 people. That's it. You've seen it. I've seen it where people tag like 50 people because they think that that's going to somehow get their post to be viral. And by the way, that's not how it works at all. And you just end up ticking people off. So that's kind of how I would describe the etiquette and really the purpose to doing it.
That's really helpful. Thanks. And I actually I've tagged people if I'm quoting them, but not to get engagement. And so that's something I'm going to try doing in the in the David Fisher way, like the appropriate way.
Tag me. We'd love to have a conversation. And that's what it's about. Perfect. It's all about keeping these conversations going, right?
Yeah. And actually someone from Horse's Mouth just did that with me. She posted something that was really relevant and interesting, and I loved her post, and it was easy for me to comment back. And the interesting thing is I didn't realize she was a power lifter. She was talking about powerlifting coaching, and I was able to throw another fact back. Like, did you know that percentage wise, there's more women powerlifters than there are women in financial services? So anyway, that's a bit of an aside, but she had really good engagement.
No, it's great.
So where do you see this going in terms of incorporating these digital tools and in-person tools? Like, what's the future in terms of building a book of business for advisors, and also in terms of prospecting and referrals? Like, how do you see all this working together?
Well, I've got my crystal ball here, and if I look into it, and I joke. I mean, I don't think any of us really know where the pendulum is going to finally settle, and I actually think for the next couple of years, it's going to we're going to be in a state of flux. We talk about the post-pandemic world. One thing I think is important for all of us to remember is there's not a date that is going to be the end, right? It's going to be this gradual evolution into us not having to worry as much as, vaccines and social distancing take effect. But I do think one of the biggest things that advisors have to do, and this is a big change, I mentioned the idea of digital transformation earlier. You are going to have to use these digital channels whether or not you like them. 5 years ago, I think as an advisor, you could say, I'm not going to really dive in. I think the social media thing is stupid. I think texting is dumb. I don't want to take a picture of my lunch. And a lot of these technologies, like think about it, LinkedIn, Zoom, all these things, they were here before the pandemic. So it's not like the pandemic changed anything. It's just kind of, ripped off the bandage. We can't just mosey into the future. And so I think whether you look at it as far as prospecting or relationship driven building or creating like maybe you're an advisor who's got great relationships with a few referral partners, centers of influence, and that's where you've kind of built your book of business. Nothing changes except for the fact that we do have more channels. I mean, one of the things I talk about in hyper-connected selling is this idea that we have a multi-channel world, right? So will video calls be important? Yes. Will LinkedIn be important? Yes. Will grabbing a cup of coffee or that business lunch or going to that conference be important when it's safe? Yes. Will sending an email to somebody or text or picking up the phone and calling, writing a note to somebody be important? Yes. So one of the biggest things advisors have to learn is how to navigate this multi-channel world and how to know when to meet in person, when it's easier just to go and do a Zoom video call, when it's better to, hey, I should pick up the phone and call them. That's a new skill set that I think everybody's going to have to learn. But the advisors that get that right are going to be set for sure.
And I think that because of these digital channels, it's easy to not do that. Like, let's pick up the phone or Zoom or whatever. Let me just send an email. And I know that now, and when I was an advisor, that the hard thing with that is there's a tone that can get carried through that might have nothing to do with what you meant. And it doesn't build that connection. I mean, you followed up with me and said, hey, after I bought your book and we corresponded, like, hey, you want to get together for a cup of tea? And then we've been able to, not recently, continue that. And I think that was such a nice way to develop a relationship where it could have just stayed asynchronous, where we're not doing things at the same time. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with that. So how do you, is there a way in terms of your sales training that you say, like, lean more towards this than that? Or How do you start to navigate that? What are some best practices in terms of being successful with all these different ways of communicating?
That's a really good question. And we're all trying to figure that out a little bit. Like say, like, here's the playbook. I'm trying to figure that out too, to help my clients and myself. I think part of it is very related to what you just said there about tone. And I think it's really important that we understand that each of these platforms has strengths and weaknesses. Email is great. Texting is great for certain situations, right? Like, I actually don't like having conversations over text. I actually have a 4 text rule. If I'm texting back and forth with somebody after 4 texts, I call them like, dude, what's up? But for a very quick transmission of information, it can be great. In the same way, I was actually just talking with somebody from a different field. He was a lawyer, and he's like, hey, I've got, this situation I'm working on. And I was like, oh, so then do you like email him back? He's like, no, this is when I pick up the phone to talk to the other attorney, because tone and all those things are important. That were his exact words. So if I had to give some best practices, number one is just ask yourself, what do I want out of this communication? Like, what do I want the end result to be? Is the end result of this communication just, I've got to confirm a meeting? Email, right? Is this the results of this communication that I just want people to know about something I'm working on? LinkedIn post. Is it I'm trying to influence somebody, or I'm sharing a bad news, or I don't even know how they'll take it? I'm going to pick up the phone. Is it I really want to just build a relationship? Let's go have a cup of coffee, right? And I think it's going to have to be a matter of putting that thought, that strategic thought, what do I want to accomplish by this piece of communication? That is going to be so important. And it's also, I think, we're going to have to become a little more sophisticated as professionals. Again, from a sales background, even financial services, there's still sales leaders that came up when you could just, bang the phone, you could cold call, and that's how you're going to build your book of business. That's not going to work at all. One, people don't pick up the phone nearly as much. And two, even if you're just picking up the phone, I'm going to then go and look at your LinkedIn profile. Mm-hmm. The RAIN Group just did a survey that 82% of potential buyers, look at a seller's LinkedIn profile, right? And so if you think that your digital presence doesn't precede you, it does. So we've got to be a little more thoughtful, and might have used the word mindful in how we talk. I think that's the biggest thing to start working on.
Perfect. I love that. So, Dave, this is great. You have such a wealth of information. I know you're doing more and more trainings on LinkedIn, and you're creating courses. If people want to find out more about you, about your trainings, your information, also, I recommend that all of you follow or link with David on LinkedIn to see what he's up to, just for a great example, besides he's a perfect person to be connected with. Where should they go to find out more about you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is always a good place. I'm at linkedin.com/in/imdfish. But also you can find me at my online home at davidjpfisher.com. If you go to davidjpfisher.com/podcast/horse's mouth, I've got a landing page for all of your listeners and viewers. I've got some great resources there, some free resources about how to really maximize their online presence. And yeah, I would love to connect and answer any questions I can.
Great. Beautiful. Thank you so much for all your great information, for being our three-peat guest. Not very many people fall into that Hall of Fame category on Horse's Mouth Live. So thank you very, very much. And thank you to all of you watching and listening. We're so grateful you're here and you're part of our community at Horse's Mouth Live. And if you haven't checked it out yet, we have an Extraordinary Advisor Masterclass starting on April 1st. And this is going to be so awesome. I'm so excited. There's amazing advisors that have already signed up for this. It's all about how to increase your influence, your impact, and your income using tools to build connections and relationships and A lot of when David was talking before about how do you make yourself sound unique, we do a lot of work on creating a business manifesto and understanding your superpower and how you show up in your practice for your prospects, your clients, and your team. So please check that out. The link's below at horsesmouth.com/masterclass. And if it's a fit, we'd love to have you there. And yeah, so I'm going to go relook at my LinkedIn profile, just make sure it's communicating what I want it to do. I hope you will do the same. And as always, remember to be great and create great every single